Thank you all for coming tonight to the last of the series of debates. Shall we just vote now? Let's get it over with. Yeah. Okay. A few things to go over before we begin. First and foremost is always thank our sponsors tonight, Miller Lumber and SunWest Builders. Also, shout out to the fabulous 10 Barrel for providing the space. Hand in Hand Productions, and of course all of our media sponsors. Before we get going, I want to introduce who it is up here in front of you. So Aaron Switzer is from The Source Weekly, and he is my co-moderator today, as is Curtis Vogel from Central Oregon Daily Show and Zolo Media. And I really appreciate both of your time. You've been here. This is the fourth time. This time round in helping us with moderation. So let me introduce you to the candidates tonight. For position 5, right, is Andrew Davis and Gena Goodman-Campbell and Victor Johnson. These three up here. And then for position number 6 is Barb Cambell. And you can't see her, but there's another candidate who couldn't be here tonight, Sarah McCormick. And we have a video to share with you. She has her intro, but she wasn't able to make it tonight because of family commitments. So let me share a little bit about how tonight's going to go. The format is we're going to start with opening comments. Everybody gets 60 seconds to tell us all while you're running what's important and what you're going to do. Then we'll go to the moderator's questions, and you'll have 60 seconds to answer the moderator's questions. After that, we're going to throw in a curveball. We have a really fun exercise that we're going to do that's interactive with the audience, and it's tech savvy.
Twister?
Yes, it is Twister. Dang it. And right foot blue, left foot red. And so we'll go through that, and then we'll get out to the audience and allow you folks to ask your questions, and Aaron and Curtis will be out here forming lines behind them. Then finally, you'll have 60 seconds to wrap things up and share with us your closing remarks. Make sense? Okay, I think I got everything on my list. All right, shall we begin? And I think, let's see, we usually start with a person on the end and move down, and then we're going to rotate with every question. So a different person goes first every time. So Andrew, would you get us started with your opening remarks?
Happily. Good evening. Thank you for coming. I want to just take a quick second to thank our sponsors again, and thank the Ben Chamber for hosting this, and also thank all the candidates for coming tonight. As we've been saying for a couple of weeks and are going to say for another week, this is a really important part of the process, and we're really excited to be able to engage with people, and we just think that this is really valuable, so thanks for that. I'm a Bend native, and that's a big part of the impetus for me running for Bend City Council. Born and raised Bendite, and specifically native to Northeast Bend, and have lived there my entire life. And I think Bend is an amazing community, and I want to be able to raise my kids here. But I know that we have some things we have to work on, and for me, the primary objective would be to work towards closing the opportunity gap, which is the gap between household income and household price. We've got folks who are getting squeezed out of our community, and I think there are some really pragmatic, straightforward things that we can do to help address that. And I look forward to sharing with you more about that this evening.
Good evening. Thank you all for coming. I'm really excited to be here with you all tonight to discuss some of the most important challenges and opportunities facing our community. A little bit about me. I'm a third-generation Oregonian, and I've spent my career here in Bend over a decade working to bring people together to protect what makes Bend special. 10 years ago, I led the campaign to protect the Badlands Wilderness, which was an effort that brought together a lot of diverse supporters, including some of Central Oregon's top employers and over 200 local businesses. This experience shaped me as a leader who understands that when you engage everyone, even people who you think might be on the other side of an issue, you can find common ground in surprising places and get to work on tackling the challenges in front of you. We have a lot of challenges as a community, and I heard a lot about those in my run for state representative in 2016 when I knocked on over 4,000 doors and heard a lot from people about affordable housing, traffic, potholes, transportation options, and just concerns about how fast we're growing. So ever since those conversations, I've had a lot of time to think about solutions, and I'm excited to talk with you all about some of my ideas tonight. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Victor Johnson, and thank you for being here tonight. I moved to Oregon in 2014 from Atlanta, Georgia, to be music director at a nonprofit preschool. And I developed a great music program, and 2 years later I was laid off. And that was very devastating and challenging. But it was also a great period of searching and spiritual growth and overcoming adversity and facing hopelessness and despair. And part of the reason I'm running for city council is to be proactive and to get involved instead of complaining, instead of being myopic and pessimistic. The more inner healing I do, the more I find I want to reach out and build community. And that's one of the most important things we can do, is build community and create unity, because we're all connected and we're all part of this city Bend that we love. And I just want to see everybody thrive and prosper.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Barb Cambell. Excuse me. I serve currently on the Bend City Council, and I am running for re-election. I really want to thank you for inviting me here today. I am a somewhat notorious sparring partner for the Chamber of Commerce, for the lobbyists, for the builders, for the lobbyists, for the realtors. The one thing I am so happy to be here in person tonight is to say that I would never advocate for you to just go away. That's not it at all. Realtors and builders are good, hardworking people in our community. They deserve to be represented. I'm happy that you invited me here this evening. I also wanted to thank you. I understand this evening there are 20 tickets that are free to the public. That was something I had complained about in the past as the cost of these events, and so that is just something I believe you responded to, and I appreciate that. So I look forward to your questions. Thanks, everybody, for coming.
Thank you, Barb. So we do have one. We invited Sarah McCormick to produce a 60-second opener. We extend that to anybody who can't make the debates. So, Garrett, do you want to fire that up? I could lip sync.
Bend Chamber, thank you for having me tonight. My name is Sarah McCormick. I'm sorry I couldn't be there. I'm in Toronto celebrating Canadian Thanksgiving with my in-laws, and it is the only time of year that my children are able to spend with their grandparents, and I really wish I could be there. I just couldn't make it happen. I am running for City Council because I am worried for the safety of my kids when we are downtown, due to the increasingly aggressive homeless population. I'm also worried that too many hardworking people can't afford to live in Bend because the housing costs are so high. To be honest, I'm most worried about the incumbent in our race because she is so concerned with national hot-button political issues that she walks out on city council meetings. I will never walk out on the city of Bend or the people of Bend. I hope that you vote this November, and I hope you place your vote for me. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks for your patience with that. So let's launch into the questions, and I believe I have the first one. And so we'll start with you, Gena, and we'll go down the line and come back. So the first question is that we hear from businesses that there is a high demand for more commercial and industrial lands. So this includes Juniper Ridge, areas in the southeast areas, as well as the northeast. And what is your strategy as a city councilor in bringing those lands online? What do you think you can do to make it happen?
I think this issue really requires focus and prioritization, and I would start by prioritizing areas that we already have planned to develop as commercial and industrial lands like Juniper Ridge. There's already a master plan in place. I think we need to go through that, make sure that we that's still meeting the needs of our community and that's still the direction we want to go, but have that be a quick review process, not get stuck in analysis paralysis of thinking about that for a long time, and then get to work on really breaking ground and beginning to attract businesses, more businesses and industries to locate there. I also think we have a lot of opportunity within the urban growth boundary expansion that has just happened, looking at where those opportunity zones are that we can develop. Also, new industry and business, commercial land in conjunction with new housing, so that we have more complete communities where people can potentially walk or bike to work and have a shorter commute if they prefer to drive.
Yes, I think we should look at different areas, pinpoint certain areas that are more suitable for industrial type of businesses. In Juniper Ridge, I think it's important to support the homeless population there, create a village, like a tiny house village that would provide hope and for those people, because we can't just displace them and move them around. And in certain parts of Bend, we could look at building up, and certain areas where that would be appropriate, and also looking at mixed-use developments that'll meet different needs and provide affordable housing, because it's really important to have housing for working population and people that are below the median income, and to find creative ways to address that. That's my thoughts.
At this moment in time, we have 3 paths that I think would be useful for getting commercial and industrial land. The first is Juniper Ridge. We maybe are unusual in that we, the city, actually own that property. We bought it from the county for $1 a couple of decades ago. But that does give us the opportunity to serve as the developer for a commercial industrial park. And we know that commercial industrial parks take a long time. It really does. It just takes a long time with a vision to actually get where you want. We just formed a committee to actually get that going. I learned at a meeting on Friday morning, we still have a deficiency in electricity up there that we need to serve to one of the lots that we say is for sale. Honestly, sometimes it's just details like that, making sure that the lots we have for sale are actually available. And then the other 2 are opportunity areas. And that depends on whether they're a single owner or a group of owners. That's where we've added more staff to be able to give support to those areas to get that land online as well.
I think this also comes down to an issue of prioritization, and as a council person, one of my priorities would be to work to annex the approved UGB as quickly as possible. We have 2,300 acres sitting approved by the state that they say we can bring into our city, and I think that's really critical for this very purpose, as well as housing. But in this regard, I think we need to focus, plan effectively, and really work with community organizations to understand what their needs are and where those needs lie. But this is the same thing that I've been hearing as I'm out meeting with businesses and organizations. They're saying there is a shortage, and for us, it all comes down to focus, and I think it's easy to get distracted by a lot of other things, but in this particular regard, we have to prioritize it highly and then make our plans accordingly to get the infrastructure there to work to make sure that we've got the lots that are the right size for the right use.
Okay, Victor, we'll start this question with you. The City Council has been faced with the challenge of how to switch about 2,600 homes that are currently on septic to sewer services. What is the best way to fund this transition?
Well, I don't think it's fair to put all the burden on a small group of people that are directly affected by that. I mean, I think we're all connected, and I think we all need to shoulder the burden, and that could be spread out to everybody to chip in a little bit, because ultimately it's going to affect all of us. And if we're going to thrive as a city, we need to support each other and create unity and share the costs of the septic situation, because at $250, that's a lot of money to someone that's already struggling to make ends meet. Those are my thoughts on that.
Thank you so much. That's an excellent question, especially after one of the last answers about quickly annexing land. Many of those homes that are affected, they think that the reason we got ourselves into this mess was because a future city council annexed them with no plan to hook them up for sewer, with no ability to improve their streets. And that's what's taking the time annexing the new lands, is making sure those plans are in place so we don't repeat those mistakes. For me, I think you could define infrastructure as that stuff that is so big that we all have to share to pay for it. To me, the only question is, what is the split going to be? How are we going to make that cost split equitable? It is simply a fact that we won't be able to have a plan that is affordable for everyone. There are some good families in the area who cannot afford a penny. They really can't. So we've got to have a safety net for everyone. But after that, it will be cost sharing and splitting with the whole community.
This is a really important issue, obviously, and probably one where most of us are going to be the most aligned tonight. And I went to one of the listening sessions because I wanted to hear firsthand from folks what is the impact, and you could tell that quickly that the impact is very real and it's very significant. $25,000 might as well be $1 million for a lot of these folks. They can't afford it. And $250 a month isn't a manageable payment. That's not manageable even for many of us who aren't on Social Security or some other form of fixed income. So in that regard, I'm a proponent of going out and looking to see if the city can meet those homeowners in the middle somewhere, extend some lines part way and bring those costs down, and then perhaps do some restructured financing that would make that payment a lot lower per month. I think that would help. And then in lieu of that, I'm a strong proponent, if we can't do that, that we need to go to every ratepayer in the city and all of us pay a little to help ease the burden, because I'm not willing to let my neighbors suffer in that regard.
This was an issue I heard a lot about when I was knocking on doors in Southeast Bend, and I was actually knocking on doors when the Southeast Interceptor sewer line was being put in, and it was really crazy to see the huge, huge pit that they were digging and the big pipe, and it was very disruptive for the neighborhood. And I also heard from a lot of people who were already worried about how they were going to need to connect up to that, and very angry about the fact that this wasn't dealt with earlier. So, I was glad to see that the city has formed a citizen committee that is made up of vast majority of people who are impacted by this issue, thinking about how we can create solutions that are going to be affordable for people. As Barb acknowledged, there are some people, and others have acknowledged, there are some people who this is simply, any cost will be too much. And so I think it's important that we make sure to establish a safety net fund so that those people have some support, the city, that everyone in the city can help pay for it. I think, looking at the city money, looking at the city budget and thinking about that money, it's all of our money. And so we're all contributing, whether it's just the city funding it or whether it's a small fee on all of our utility bills. So I think it's something that everybody would be willing to pitch in just a little bit on.
Thank you, Jenna. Barb, we'll start with you with this question. We have a severe child care shortage in Bend that's affecting employees and employers alike. We've done stories where people are on a 2-year wait list to get into child care facilities. And one mom joked with us, I should have started before I was even pregnant. If that's the kind of situation we're facing, how can the city incentivize and help increase the number of child care centers to open their doors in Bend?
This is a problem that has lingered for decades. The first job I ever had out of college was operating a little daycare center that teachers themselves had set up at a private school to solve this problem for themselves. We at the city, sadly, we have not got a lot of opportunities to be able to help private businesses, but we are able to do things with our permits and our codes. Simply seeing if we can give someone a break on the permit fees that we require. And the other is, quite frankly, sometimes we can just let somebody ahead to the front of the line. We do that with affordable housing projects. When we don't have any actual funds or support to offer them, we can at least put them in the front of the line of our permits. I would be more than happy to work with the county. They are usually the administrator of CBGB funds. I probably said that wrong. Maybe a multi-agency, we might be able to do more. Thanks for the question.
I think we can do two things. One is looking at that permitting process and seeing if we can expedite that in some way, and also look at the costs and see if there's a way we could incentivize for folks to make it affordable for them to get into the business of taking care of kids. And I think at the same time, we need to work with the state to make sure that we don't sacrifice safety or quality for kids. I think that's a really important component of this issue because some of these processes are put in place at a state level for really important reasons, and we want to make sure that we balance those two things. That being said, I'm certainly familiar with friends and family who are taking their kids to Redmond because that's where they're able to find affordable childcare or any childcare. So I think that definitely we need to take a really close look at that. And for me, that would be those two approaches is let's look at that permitting process and simultaneously let's make sure that we don't sacrifice child safety, and I don't think anybody would want to, but I think that's a pretty critical piece of this.
So this is an issue that hits home for me personally. I have a 7-month-old at home right now with her dad, and I filled out my first child care application for her when she was 3 months old, and honestly, I should have started probably before I got pregnant. And so, I think that this is something where this is a business that is really a critical service. It's not like other businesses, because if you don't have someplace safe to take your child while you're working, then you can't work. So it's a real economic issue for a lot of people in Bend, and it's something that I think is really affecting our economy overall when you look at employment and employers being able to attract people here, businesses looking at locating here. It's like housing in that if there aren't quality options for people, they will simply go somewhere else. So I think, yes, we can look at prioritizing permitting for child care centers so that, that they can jump to the front of the line, and so that I've heard from several real estate developers and others in town who are saying that they have people who want to locate here, want to refurbish buildings, or want to build new buildings, and they're being stymied by long permitting processes.
I've been working in teaching music in preschools for 8 years, and it's very important to me providing quality arts-based education because children are our future, and that was what brought me here to work in a nonprofit preschool where I worked with kids every day and did music and acting and drama. And I'm still doing that part-time at Munchkin Manor, which is a local preschool. And it's a real need, and the more people come to Bend, the more opportunities we're going to need for people to find affordable childcare. So I'd love to see us subsidize more preschools, quality preschools, work with businesses coming into Bend to provide quality arts-based care for our preschool-age children because it's really important, needs to be a priority.
Thank you, Victor. Andrew, we'll start this question with you. Let's talk about Mirror Pond, and assuming that the current status of the dam doesn't change, so we're talking about the dredging of Mirror Pond, how much should the city be involved in the payment of what that's going to cost? And if not the city, or if that's a lesser amount, then who should take responsibility for that?
Yeah, I think the dredging of Mirror Pond for me is a partnership between several entities. The city is one of them, in my opinion. I think Mirror Pond holds historic and iconic significance for the city of Bend, and therefore it's a part of our fabric. Growing up in Bend, you couldn't not know Mirror Pond, and I don't think that you can come here and not know Mirror Pond. So I think that the city does have a piece to play. I think Parks and Rec also has a piece to play in that equation. Drake Park is very significant in terms of our city park system and in terms of folks using it for recreation, and so I think there's a piece there. And I also think that the homeowners along that stretch of river have some obligation in terms of paying because their property values are going to change. And so for me, it's a partnership, and it's something that we have to address fairly quickly so that we don't have it go too long and become a whole different set of problems that we have to deal with.
I have a different perspective on this issue. It's important to acknowledge that the land underneath Mirror Pond is privately owned by Mirror Pond LLC. And so to me, the burden falls on those private landowners to fund the dredging or to decide how they're going to gather the funding for that. They're currently seeking funding from the city, and I've been a little bit frustrated watching that take up valuable time and resources from city, from volunteers, from staff, of thinking about how the city might contribute to that, when in my mind, I'm not even sure that the city should, because we have a lot of priorities, we have a lot of challenges we're facing, People want the city to be focusing on things like road maintenance, septic to sewer, other critical issues that are affecting people on a day-to-day basis. And at least I know personally I'm not hearing, as I'm out knocking on doors, from people who think that dredging Mirror Pond is one of those priorities that we ought to be contributing valuable and scarce resources towards.
I think multiple entities should help with the dredging of Mirror Pond, the private owners, the City of Ben, Ben Parks and Rec. And it is iconic, and it's an important part of Ben to a lot of people, and maybe they could get partnerships with businesses that would support dredging of Mirror Pond and contribute financing for that, because it's an important need that needs to happen. It hasn't been dredged since 1984, just a long time ago. So yeah, I think the cost needs to be split up, and we could look into creative alternative sources of funding.
There is a gentleman in town named Wade Fagan, and I don't think he'll mind my talking about him because he's running for council a couple of times. And he operates a business, and his business, he takes away dead trees. If you've got a tree in your yard that has died, he'll come, he'll take it away, he'll chop it up into little pieces. And so he takes away dead trees and he produces bark chips. Well, we have a business, a private business in the middle of our Deschutes River called Pacific Power. And they take away the dark, they take the darkness away, and they leave behind silt and sediment in Mirror Pond. When Wade Fagan's wood chips, when the piles got so big that they were spilling into public right-of-way, we started writing him tickets. And when he didn't pay the tickets, we took him to court to clean up his wood chips. I cannot imagine how Pacific Power has changed this conversation to where not only is it not their responsibility to clean up their own mess after they've been making money with the mess for 100 years, but they're actually getting people to talk about spending tax money on it. I say none. Thanks.
Gena, I believe we start this question with you. How can the city help increase affordable workforce and other housing stock?
This is my top priority, so I'm really excited about the question. So there are a few things. One is we need to increase the supply of housing in our community, but not just any supply. We need to increase the supply of housing that's affordable to people making the median income and below. Right now, we actually have some supply of housing, pretty good supply of housing that is available to people making $150,000 or more, roughly. So that's not most people in Bend. We need to get more of our land kind of construction ready, so that we need to prioritize the permitting for affordable housing. We need to look at building, how we can encourage building more middle market housing, like condos, townhomes, everything in between a single family home and a high-rise apartment building. Those tend to be more affordable. We may need to look at incentives and other tax breaks for developers to make those pencil out. And finally, we need to leverage our affordable housing fee that we already have through the urban renewal process in the urban growth boundary.
I think we need to find creative ways to come up with affordable housing, mixed-use buildings, apartment high-rises, working with organizations like Thrive and Neighbor Impact and Housing Works. And it's really important need. More people are coming into Bend, and we're going to need more housing. So it definitely needs to be addressed. It's a big priority. And those are my thoughts on that.
When I was elected to council, it was like the patient was hemorrhaging. And we went after that with apartments. And in the last 3 years, we are seeing apartments being built to many people's idea at an alarming rate. I believe we've got another 1,000 being permitted right now. And that was an excellent first step to get housing on the ground just available. And I'm finally starting to hear anecdotally from young folks that at least there are apartments for them to look at, even if they're still too unaffordable. But I think our next push has to be for that equity piece. Apartments do not provide home equity for people. And we are going to have to accept that our land is expensive, and those housing types, even if they're for purchase, need to be new types. We need to have a greater assortment, things like a duplex where you own your own half, condo that you actually own. I think we have an opportunity to do that.
This is tied to one of my top priorities also. The way I see workforce housing is it's a twofold problem. It's a supply of buildable of land for buildable homes, and also a supply of land that's commercial use, as we discussed earlier, so that businesses can come here that pay a higher median household wage. I think if we can address the problem from two sides, we can far more quickly get to workforce housing. I'm going to disagree with Gena a little bit. Bend does not have the healthiest supply of housing, and we've got about 765 homes on the market, which is just under a 90-day supply. That's not to say that we don't have homes on the market, but we don't have a plethora of homes. So to get to that, I'm going to go back to annexing in the approved UGB and also getting out ahead of the problem so that we don't end up in this pinch again, and work now towards getting an approved UGB with the state. So already get into the implementation phase or the planning phase of that, so that 15 years from now, we don't end up asking ourselves the same question, but exacerbated.
Thank you, Andrew. Victor, we'll start with you on this one. I want to talk about biking in Bend, and I'm not just talking necessarily about recreationally, but actually trying to get from A to B, either for your job or another purpose, so as not to have to get in your car. And I know that there's been bike lanes included in transportation and neighborhood plans as we move forward, but we just did a story recently with a custom bike maker who used to make bikes for all different sorts, road, trail, mountain biking, and he says he gets no requests for road bikes anymore because his customers tell him they do not feel safe being on the roads in Bend anymore. We've had a young woman killed recently on the roads. But then you've got other people who are wanting to drive and saying that bikes on the road, a war on cars sort of statement about, are we choosing bikes over cars here? What are we doing with our plans? How do you reconcile those factions and the needs of what we need for everybody to be able to move around in the city as far as planning for it and funding for bike lanes?
I think we need to make Bend more pedestrian bike friendly, particularly downtown. I think we could structure downtown to be more bike friendly and pedestrian friendly, and come up with more alternative transportations like busing programs that can get people around, and create better bike paths for people that are connected throughout Bend. It'd be great for someone to be able to bike from one side of town all the way to the other and feel safe. I think we need to look at alternative ways of transportation and create more of a green space in Bend and less focus on cars.
The thing I'm most excited about are neighborhood greenways. I got myself elected by way of neighborhood traffic safety, and I learned about neighborhood greenways from Portland. And the idea of a neighborhood greenway is you take the thoroughfare and you go a block away onto a residential street, onto a street where the traffic's already slow. And on that street, you add improvements, you add speed bumps, you get the majority of your bike and pedestrian traffic onto infrastructure that you already have. You just need to improve it. And then those bike lanes that frankly are unsafe, that's just how you're getting that last 200 feet off of the path, off of the neighborhood greenway. It's also our parks district. We have a huge parks district, and they are actively working on a more connected system of paths. We are trying to work together with them, especially in the new UGB lands, before they're developed, when we have that opportunity. I think things are looking brighter in the future for that.
I think this is a complicated but important question, because the most recent data that I've seen says that about 78 or 79% of people in Bend are still single occupant commuters. Another 7.5% are commuting together. So we've got 85, 86% of people in their cars. and then somewhere around 3% on bikes, and then et cetera, et cetera. So the way I would approach this is, as we're improving roads, we need, because it's not feasible to go into the city and just immediately improve every road, right? Obviously, our budget's not going to support that. So as we're doing road improvements, especially major thoroughfares, I think we really need to be focused on making sure that those roads are of adequate width and have really well-designated bike lanes, because certainly we want to accommodate folks, and I think that's a economically realistic way to work on that. And then I think we need to, as we're developing into new areas, we need to make sure that that's in the forefront of our minds, because I think Bend developed so quickly that honestly it's something that got left by the wayside.
So this is, again, a really personal issue for me. Before I had a baby and who's still too small to ride on a bike, I biked a lot of places. And when I was knocking on doors, I biked all around Bend in every neighborhood. So I really got to experience firsthand how unsafe it is to bike in certain neighborhoods in Bend, and how that's really not a safe option. So if we want more people to be getting out and biking and out of their cars and out of traffic, we need to make it more safe and make people feel that this is a safe option for them no matter where they live in Bend. So Barb stole my answer. I'm, in the short term, excited about neighborhood greenways that are going to be coming on. They're cheap and in comparison to building all new infrastructure. I'm also excited to work with Bend Parks and Recreation. In their strategic budget plan, they have working with the city to build more connected bike and pedestrian trails. And finally, we have a huge opportunity with the long-range transportation system planning process that's currently underway. So looking at how we can avoid having this problem in the future and actually building a system of interconnected bike and pedestrian routes.
Barb, I believe we're coming to you first with this question. Tourism buoyed Bend's economy through the last recession, but the fiscal year 2018 budget for Visit Bend is expected to show a 9% decrease from 2017. The city relies on TRT for public safety funding. How do you propose to supplant the loss of tourism dollars?
Supplant the loss of tourism dollars? I don't plan to supplant the loss of tourism dollars. I think we have to do a better job planning for the peaks and valleys that are normally expected. It is just simply true that tourism is hit harder by recessions than any other industries. We have a rainy day fund that we have kept stocked to be able to have that advertising fund safe. But I think you're absolutely right. Are we storing funds for police and fire? I would caution people to be worried about a 9% decrease. A 9% decrease came after a 14% increase. I think most of us understand that the absolute numbers mean we still have a whole lot of visitors out there paying room tax.
Aaron, I'm sorry, will you repeat that question?
Tourism buoyed Bend's economy through the last recession, but the fiscal year 2018 budget for Visit Bend is expected to show a 9% decrease from 2017. The city relies on TRT for public safety funding. How do you propose to supplant the loss of tourism dollars?
The first thing that I would consider in that equation is what impact the eclipse had on our 2017 budget, because I think it's possible that 2017 was quite a buoyed year compared to 2018. But then in that regard, I'm a proponent of the TRT and the way we use it to promote tourism in Bend. I think that we need to continue that. I know there's been some talk around whether or not we would shift some to facilities. I think 15 to 20% of Bend's economy is reliant upon tourism, and it's one of the largest economic drivers we have. And so I would say to continue to maximize that and use it to the best of our ability to help people learn about the great city that we are. We could say anecdotally that they already know, but I think the businesses, the hotels, the restaurants, the small businesses in Bend that are all dependent upon that, we certainly don't want to see them suffer with a massive decrease in tourism.
So I think it is important to think big picture about how we're going to diversify our economy so that we're less and less dependent on these kind of boom and bust type industries. You know, we went from timber and then over to tourism, and I think we're starting to strike more of a balance where we're bringing in other industries and making sure that we have a diversified economy that can withstand the different booms and busts that some of these industries go through. I also think that we just have to be looking long term at our budget and making sure that we're not borrowing from one pot of money to pay for another. And so, I think in the past we've borrowed from road maintenance to pay for public safety, and then it's like, oh no, our roads are falling apart, we need to borrow from public safety to pay for our roads. And so really taking a long-range view and making sure that whatever these peaks and valleys are, we have enough revenue to pay for the critical services, whether the tourism, the transient room tax dollars go up and down a little bit.
We have a very strong tourism in Bend, and I think that's going to continue because more and more people know about Bend now. It's the 4th largest growing city in the United States. I would like to see more support of local businesses and local arts and music vendors. Yeah, recently someone put up a petition that I don't agree with, but it was saying let's move the major festivals out of the downtown because they felt like they weren't being supported. But I would like to explore that more and put more money into the local economy and do smaller scale events that highlight local arts and music talent, because there are so many talented creative people in Bend that need to be nurtured and encouraged to thrive and prosper. And I'd love to see them highlighted.
Okay, I think we are done with the panel questions. And so now we come to the fun part. We tried this last week with, who was it last week? House seats. I don't know. Somebody about a place with people. House districts 53 and 54. And it was a really great exercise. I think you'll enjoy it, and I think you guys will get a lot out of it. So you want to pull up the phone number that okay, great. So we're going to ask a question of you. First thing you do is pull out your smartphone and go to www.menti.com and punch in that code with your phone. Text 614602. And as you're doing that, here's how it works. We've asked this question: what trait is most important in being an effective city councilor? You guys get to weigh in on that. It goes up on the screen. It forms a word cloud. The more people who say one word, the bigger that word becomes on the screen. You know what I'm talking about. They use that at EDCO. So what happens is you folks will have this thing up here with a lot of words on it on what makes a good leader. And I want you each to pick one and tell us why you are that type of a leader. So here we go. It's starting to populate. And Andrew, you're going to be first. It's your turn up first. But let's see what happens. We have 16 people, 19. All right. Integrity's looking big. Collaboration. Looks like we're stopping, almost. Great. Okay. So this is going to continue to populate with a few more folks potentially, but you get the picture. So why don't you pick one of these and tell us why you have that trait.
I'm going to get motion sick from watching that. I'm going to look away.
60 minutes.
Given
60 seconds.
Given
60
that collaboration
seconds.
and collaborative are both there, and that would probably form the largest word if combined, I'll take that. I am inclined to think that collaboration is a highly critical skill set for a city councilor. And one of the things that I have been fortunate to do in my career is work with college students. And let me tell you, if you're working with college students, you don't have any choice but to be collaborative, because they all have really strong ideals and really strong opinions. And I've been blessed to work in roles that required me to advise, mentor, and lead. And that meant I had to get people talking, and I had to get them working together, and often they were headed very different directions. The way I go about that is I get people to talk about values before I talk about solutions. I think it's really critical for us to talk about what matters before we talk about how or why we would address it. And I think that's part of just the way that I'm wired. I do that in my day job now. I also handle student conduct. And let me tell you, there's no more collaborative environment than working with a student, their parents, and a faculty member that are upset because something has gone wrong.
I don't know. I would beg to differ. There might be a more collaborative process in working to. So my career has been in working to help people find common ground around management of our public lands, which natural resources issues I think are some of the most contentious issues out there. I come from the environmental conservation side, but I day to day have to work with ranchers, farmers, business owners. All sorts of different people from different walks of life, and it's been a hugely valuable experience because those are some really wonderful relationships I've been able to build with people. But my approach to that is to simply listen first and start by hearing what ideas somebody has and what their needs are, and then thinking about how we can work creatively to combine those with other ideas that I've heard. So when we take all of those ideas and all of those needs together, can we put that together in a package that is going to actually be a win-win and serve as many people's needs as possible? I think that would serve me really well as a city councilor, and I have experience in directly making that into public policy.
Integrity is so important. As I said earlier, I was laid off 2 years ago because certain people had, the board of directors found they had mismanaged hundreds of thousands of dollars, and that left me in a really difficult position. But the whole time I was there, I continued to practice integrity, and made sure I had a safe haven for the kids I was working with, and that I didn't let that affect the work I was doing with them. I believe integrity is really important, and that everything is connected, every aspect of your life. I've been really dedicated to doing a meditation practice just for a couple months. This summer I would go to the river every morning and meditate. Just genuine and authentic interaction is key to a positive communication and working together.
This is super cool, but I'm afraid now we're all afraid to say anything other than collaboration. I will say you are correct. Collaboration is the #1 answer. And if there is one thing I have learned, the reason is not because, I'll tell you the truth, I don't think it's because collaboration is going to get you to the very, very best possible solution, but I think it will get you to a solution that will last. And that has been, I've come to see how important that is. If a solution was just pushed through by, individuals, it just won't stand. City council is just like anything else. Those councilors will get voted out, and then they'll end up spending your time and your tax money going over that issue again. So I think it's collaboration. The other one I'm gonna grab is experience, since I'm the incumbent up here. I moved to town in 1981. I started my business 9 years ago. I first ran for council 6 years ago and was elected 4 years ago when my opponent moved to town. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Okay, now we move to the next section, which is your opportunity to ask questions. So Curtis is going to be on this side, Aaron over there. Who would like to ask the first question of the panel? You can ask it of one person, but all of you can answer if you want to, and maximum of 60 seconds. Okay? All right. In the back, Sally Russell.
Sally Russell, Bend City Council. I'm Mayor Pro Tem, and I'm running for mayor. So my question to you is this. What is the most important trait that you see in our next mayor?
Go ahead. Who wants to go with that?
Who's supposed to lead us off? Sorry, Katy.
Anybody can. Go ahead, and whoever wants to start first. If you don't feel like you need to answer, you don't have to. If you want to, go for it.
I'm happy to take a swing at that. Sally, I want to make sure I understood you correctly. You don't want to know what trait is the most important in the next city councilor. You want to know what's the most important in the next city mayor? Okay. I just want to make sure I'm answering your question. That's important to me. Okay. Sure. anytime I look at a leader, I'm looking for someone who's visionary. I need someone who can get a group of people together and say to them, let's work together to figure out where we're going, and then we'll figure out what it's going to take to get there. But part of a leader's job is to cast a vision, to say, this is something that's really critical. You know, there's always 100 objectives and priorities. I think that someone who's in some sort of a management role has an obligation to be able to cast that vision effectively and get others to buy into it.
I think that the traits we were just talking about are important for a mayor as well. Being able to bring people together and come to an agreement on a common solution, but also being decisive. Once that solution is clear, I think part of being a strong leader is saying, okay, everyone, here's what I heard. Here's what I think our solution is here, and we're going to go and implement it now, and not letting us get stuck in, well, okay, did we hear from everyone? You know, I think eventually you do have to decide, move forward, and this is where we're going as a community.
Important qualities: someone who can unify and bring people together of really different viewpoints, and because we're so divided in so many ways, in many different ways, but we all matter, we're all connected. I have a friend that lives out of his van, another friend that's a street artist and doesn't even have a home. And the transient people, they're all important, they're all here. And someone who has a vision and can think in the long term and see the big picture, and who cares about the different communities, like the arts and music community, which it's really important to me. And there's other communities too. We need to bring them all together and just draw people together to unify and be a leader and proactive and have a vision.
Bend is kind of weird in that we have such a fragmented system of governments. We have the San City Council, the Parks District is separate, the Library District is separate, the School District is separate. And what I'm looking forward to is that leader that people can go to that they really do see as the place for that elected leadership. I'm being redundant here, but I feel like sometimes in Bend, people don't know who's just their local elected person that they go to with a problem. You know, it's too separated. And I think it'll be really nice to have a mayor who actually intentionally wants to go to parades and wants to go talk to school kids and wants to go represent us to the city and back again. I feel like that's something we're missing now, and it'll be good to have that.
Thank you, panel. All right, Karna.
Hi, Karna Gustafson. I have a question about urban reserves. In areas outside of the UGB, there's some land that grows rocks really well. So my question has to do with whether we need to look at some of those lands for future growth in a form of urban reserves. And what is each of your positions on urban reserves?
Who would like to take that first?
I took the last one first, so I'm going to defer to one of my colleagues.
Okay. My concern right now is we are behind. Previous council did not get a UGB expansion passed, and it did. It set us back almost 10 whole years behind. Our goal right now, I believe, should be implementing that UGB plan that we have in front of us as quickly and effectively as possible. And those staff people, that takes committed, knowledgeable staff people, and they're kind of the same people who work on the next expansion. I do not want to give up people who are working right now, trying to get lands on the ground right now for some sort of a head start on lands for 15 years from now. We've got to do both, and we've been asking the city manager literally about that question, about hiring new staff or about hiring consultants. But that's my only concern, Karna, is just that we are watching our resources.
Next.
And yes, I agree with that. And we also do have a responsibility to look every 5 years at how we're making sure we're maintaining a buildable supply of land for the next generation. And so I agree it is important to, while we're prioritizing following through on our commitments in the current urban growth boundary, looking at where those next areas might be, especially when we're in a process of long-range transportation system planning, looking at how our infrastructure could serve those areas. It's important to know where those next areas might be so that we make sure we're planning correctly and having infrastructure built that's going to serve those areas.
Yeah, I think it's really important to look ahead and keep that in mind. I came here from Atlanta, where there's some ways that roads that were created that are a real mess and were not really well thought out, like Spaghetti Junction. And I saw a prediction for the population increase in Deschutes County. It's like mind-boggling how fast it's growing. But we also want to preserve the integrity of Bend, the beautiful nature aspect of Bend. So we have to keep that in mind. But yeah, it needs to be a priority to look ahead and deal with what we're backed up on as well.
One of the things that I've observed in my 34 years in Bend has been the boom and bust cycles that we've often suffered from. And I think that looking at those areas, Karna, is a critical component of helping us get out of that, because it's very easy for us to look a few years into the future and then a few years into the future, and then when things get bad, when we hit the recession, we put the brakes on some things, and I think that was one of them. And I think at the rate Bend is growing, and if anybody thinks Bend's not growing quickly, I would love to hear your perspective after we're done, perhaps over a beer. Bend's growing quickly, and if we're going to have an ample supply of land for homes, for businesses, for parks, for all the things that make Bend a place that people want to live, work, eat, sleep, and breathe, then we need to be working with the county, and we need to be working with them early, because otherwise we're going to end up in a pinch, and 5 years from now we'll say, why didn't we start 5 years ago?
Okay, thank you. Next question, please.
Good evening. So in 2017, Deschutes County had higher rates of both tobacco use and marijuana use, youth rates, both middle and high school in Deschutes County. I was just wondering how you plan to address this issue if you are elected.
Say that again?
So in 2017, Deschutes County had higher rates of tobacco use and marijuana use rates compared to the state average. How do you plan to address this issue going forward?
As a city councilor, what could you do to reduce the rates of tobacco use? And overall substance abuse.
In high schools?
Middle school and high school.
Okay, well, one thing I would like to see is providing funding for artists and musicians to go into high schools and junior high schools and work with kids to address bullying, and also to teach about mindfulness and being grounded, because that's something I didn't learn when I was in school, and it's really helped me, especially this past year, be grounded. And everything like we're experiencing, it's even bigger for kids. I was distraught last year when Deshaun Adderley took his own life at Summit High School. So it's really important to interact with kids. My 8-year-old goes to Westside Village, where all the older kids worked with the preschool kids or the elementary kids and mentor them. And as adults in this community, we can mentor kids and work with them and talk to them and work in small groups and make a difference.
I have started thinking in terms of whose jurisdiction something is. And again, it has to do with that fragmented government, and parks, that's just not us. It's not, we don't do that. Library, it's just not us. But there are some problems that I really do think are all of us. They are all hands on deck. We've just got to help. In my opinion, climate change is one of those issues, and the health of our kids, it absolutely is. We have almost no authority presence in the schools. We do provide the resource officers. We did We were active in raising the age for tobacco to 21 from 18 at the city level was something we were able to get involved with and lobby for. But I agree. I'm not just going to say that's not our problem. It's not our fault. We don't do the schools. But I can't say I have any great ideas for you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you for your question. I want to be completely transparent with you and say I have given zero thought to this issue prior to right now. But I will tell you that the way I would approach the issue for me would be starting with some conversations, and I think having some conversations between the city and the school district seem like an appropriate place to start. What is the issue beyond just access? You know, what are the rates? Why are students getting access to it? And I would say also having even a conversation perhaps with local OLCC and saying, what do we have an enforcement issue? Where does the problem really lay, so that we could figure out what would be an appropriate response? For me, that would be a critical component, because I think it would be easy to say, let's throw money at a program that educates people. I think there's a lot of education that goes on this issue. I think it'd be super simple to jump to conclusions or a solution, and I would say for me, it would be a half-second pause to say, why is this happening?
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add except to say that, thank you for your question, and I would look to people who are experts in this and seeing how we can work with the county and other government entities. I have a lot of relationships with people on school board, COCC board, Parks board, and figuring out if there are any ways that the city is a barrier or could pass ordinances like raising the age for tobacco use to help address this problem.
Thank you, candidates. Curtis, you have the next question.
Thank all of you for your support, or for being here tonight to support the people who are going to vote for you. Councilor Campbell, you said something interesting about lobbying. I think that you're absolutely right. Jurisdiction's a problem, especially in Central Oregon. We do have a lot of them. But my question is about if you were reelected, or anybody else who's at this table today, what are the issues in Salem you would like to see some effort from the city going to, whether it's lobby dollars or things that you would pick up as a counselor that you think the city of Bend needs to have a voice at the statewide level?
It would be issues around transportation. One thing in particular, I serve on our metropolitan planning organization, and then I also serve on a statewide committee, regional committees for transportation. And our own city, I'll just tell you, I'm afraid we're misclassified. A lot of these meetings, I am sitting, I'm not making this up, next door right? I'm sitting next to the people who are representing Metolius. Do you know where Metolius is? I don't even know if Metolius has 1,000 people. And we are literally in the same room on the same committee in competition for the same funds. I mean, we are looking for $25 million to go over railroad tracks, and Metolius is hoping for some sidewalks, So I think there are some fundamental structural things that honestly we might just be misplaced, and it could have to do with our rapid growth.
Who would like to go next? Andrew?
I'm happy to go second. One of the issues that I think the city of Bend needs to be working with the state on has to do with UGB and expansions. I will admit that I have a whole lot more to learn about this, but one of the things that I understand is very much that our state has adopted sort of a one-size-fits-all model, and I don't know that that model fits Central Oregon or Eastern Oregon the same way that it fits Portland or Eugene or Salem. And so I think as Bend grows and moves towards a city that's much larger than it is today, that we should be working closely with the state to examine whether or not we need to make changes to that model and that system to see if we can find some things that work a little bit more effectively for us.
I just want to quickly speak to that. Oregon is a special place that it is, I think, largely because of our land use laws, and people move here for a specific reason because they want to live in a place with beautiful open spaces and farmland very close to town. And so I think that is, to me, a fight that I wouldn't want to spend, critical time and resources trying to tackle. I'm more interested in looking at how we can work with the state to increase affordable housing. The state has a lot of affordable housing. They have affordable housing funds. They have resources that we could look to. They also work on laws directly related to affordable housing. So really working closely with legislators, both from Central Oregon and from elsewhere, to help them understand why this problem, how this problem impacts people uniquely in Central Oregon, and what some solutions are that could work for us.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Affordable housing is maybe one of the biggest priorities. Creating more green space and alternative solutions to transportation, and finding more state certified and licensed preschool centers. There was a daycare center that was shut down earlier, and the owner went to prison. We need more quality childcare, and the state can really help with that. And creating more in-home care that's licensed, certified.
Thank you. We're going to go back over on this side of the room.
Thank you very much. There's no doubt in my mind that Bend is a place of major change, maybe more change than anywhere else in the nation as far as I know. And a lot of those are national changes, even global changes, and others are very much close to home. So my concern would be that we have a lot of factors that are statewide that we kind of buck the trend. We have a lot of differences, and land use policy is one that doesn't seem to fit us very well. How important is it to you to advocate for the differences that are here in Bend with our state government and the county where it might be important if you're elected?
For me, it all comes down to balance. I think we have to be looking at those issues and understanding clearly how they're going to impact our future, and we have to also look at what issues are right in front of us that we have to solve perhaps more quickly. I would say globally it is important for us to be working with the county and the state fairly intentionally to address those very issues. Bend, I think, has always bucked the trend as far as my lifespan here goes. Bend is one of those places that everybody wants to come to, and everybody partially wants to come here because of what we have recreationally, but also what we have in terms of community, and because of the fact that we are a little bit different. And so I think it would be important for us to be focused on both those issues in the context of balancing the things that we can work on that are right in front of us. So it'd be a little bit duality there.
Bend is a unique place. It's very different, and moving forward, I think it's really important to preserve the integrity of Bend and not drastically change it, and pay attention to where becoming more industrial, and because we want to preserve Bend for what it is, and it's very special, so many different aspects.
You are absolutely right that a number of the rules or laws that we have to follow simply were not written with conditions over on this side of the mountain in mind. But with respect to the land use laws, if I might, most of my family lives in Colorado still, and that means Denver, Colorado Springs, and Pueblo. And so I go to Colorado and people go, oh, and I go, oh, well, I was visiting my family in the cities, which is a different thing than being in the mountains. But every time I go out there, I come back and I am more and more sure that we might not be protecting farmland as a resource over here on the east side of Bend. And we might not be protecting timber, but we're protecting our tax dollars. Every time I go out there, it just astonishes me how much money it is in sales tax. Every sale, every time, 8% for giant roads out to developments. I think we are protecting something just as important as farmland and forest land when it comes to land use.
I do agree with you that Bend is different and experiencing a lot of rapid change, and that's One of the things that motivated me to run for state representative is that I don't think our voice and our perspective is adequately represented a lot of times in Salem. We hear, I've been frustrated to hear some of the dominating perspectives from people in Portland and the Willamette Valley on issues like land management. So I do think it's important to have those conversations, but to me the key is communication, because we need to be able to clearly communicate how we're different, how policies are impacting us, and what ideas we have. It's not just kind of saying, hey, this is a really big problem for me. This is a problem, here's a solution we're considering, what do you think about this? So it's not necessarily saying this rule doesn't work for me, but just making sure we're communicating about what our unique needs are and how we would like to work with the state. A big problem that we had with the urban growth boundary proposal that failed was a lack of communication, I think, and a lack of communication from the state as well, coming back to us saying, look, this isn't going to work.
Thank you. One more question over here, Curtis.
Hi, I'm Rachel Cardwell. I'm in the current class of Leadership Bend. Thank you so much for being here and joining us as our community leaders as we are learning to be leaders ourselves. I want to ask a hard question about diversity. I moved here a year ago from Tacoma, Washington, which is an incredibly diverse community. And I recognize in 1 year that our institutions, our politics, our schools, our community is dominated by whiteness, whether that's good or bad, intentional or unintentional. It is what it is, and we need to own that and all it means. And so my question to you is, first, do you believe that diversity and inclusion is a value that's held by this community? And if your answer is yes, tell me as a counselor, what's one action that you would take to encourage diversity and inclusion in our community?
Who wants to take that?
I can tell you one action I have taken. I passed a resolution at City Council to make all of the committees that we ourselves appoint reflect our community better. And you're absolutely right. In our community, that doesn't mean much difference in skin color, but it does mean we have to be intentional about people of different ages, women and men, and different parts of town. I will tell you what I think, and it's not local. It's Vote No on 105. Our own police chief talks about how important it is that all of our citizens feel safe and included in their community, and that is a part of our own safety. If your own neighbor is afraid to call the police because they're afraid of that contact themselves, that means that you're not as safe as you might be. It means that they are not going to call for help on your behalf. So I do believe we have excellent policies in place. We've just got to defend them, maybe.
Sorry, Victor. I wasn't trying to cut you off. Rachel, I think this is a really difficult question, as you stated. I think there is a huge difference between stated values and lived values, and I think Bend is in an interesting transition period where stated value, absolutely. Lived value, I think we're figuring out how to do that because of some of the whiteness that you've referenced. Bend has been a very homogenous culture for a long time, and I think in terms of ethnic and racial diversity in particular, that's a challenge. Now, I would say in terms of work that I've done or work that I would do, in my day job, I'm part of our campus diversity committee, and I also, as I said, oversee our conduct process and advocate regularly and aggressively to make sure that all people are welcome and included on our campus. I would bring those same ideals and values to the city council.
Sure. Diversity is so important. We're all connected, we all matter. I've been a member of a unity community of Central Oregon for over 2 years now. I'm on the music team there, and they recently moved to a new site off of 20 and Cooley Road, and it's called the Unity World or One World Center, and it's also the home of Desert Sky Montessori and Unity, Y-O-U-N-I-T, because I think it's important to celebrate diversity and accept everybody and help everyone to feel safe and that they're a part of this community. I would also like to see the city council support the LGBTQ community with the Pride Parade that happens every year, and to recognize that and provide support to that community as well.
So I agree that this is a value that is held by most people in Bend: diversity, inclusion, equity. But I wouldn't say that it's necessarily a priority. And so I really appreciate hearing what Councillor Campbell said about making sure that that's a priority, that we're including all voices in citizen committees, because those committees make a lot of important decisions and they really inform what staff and city are working on. So in terms of hearing from the broadest array of people in terms of what their needs are and what their perspective is, I think that's really important. One little thing that struck me a couple of years ago when I attended a City Club presentation about Bend's tourism promotion and the transit room tax dollars. Visit Bend aired a commercial that they were airing all over the West Coast. And were there any people of color in that commercial of people having fun visiting Bend? No, there were not. Very simple change, but that's something that projects who we are as a community and who we think the people who come to visit us and maybe want to live here someday look like.
I want to thank you all for your questions, and I want to acknowledge there are several members of the Bend Chamber Leadership Bend class of 2019, and they're all getting extra credit, but also are very interested in local politics and growing into the leadership positions here in our community, and it's a really great thing to have them involved in debates and current issues. So I thank you all for coming tonight. So we are going to wrap up tonight with 60 seconds of closing statements. And what I'd like to do is reverse the order that we started with and start with you, Councillor Campbell. 60 seconds each, and then we'll close this out. Thank you.
Thank you, Katy. Thanks, everyone. Thomas Jefferson talked about well-informed electorate being such an important part of our system. So all of you that came out in the rain and got around the car accidents, you're very much appreciated. I'm running for re-election. I've come to think of it as a little garden I've been working on for 4 years. I've been working so hard on this little garden. But the hardest thing to get re-elected to be gardener again is so much of the work is little seeds that you can't even see are there yet. They're still under the ground. And then the other thing that you can't see are the weeds that have already been pulled and thrown away. And those are the things like the bad annexation policy. We're never again gonna have a piece of industrial land up against a single family home. Our future really is brighter than this uncontrolled growth we've had. I honestly do. It just looks to me like past councils just got taken by surprise, and we are much better prepared, and I hope to be gardener for another 4 years.
Thank you for being here tonight. I'm running for city council to be a voice for the music and arts community, and for anyone who's maybe feels marginalized or that doesn't have a voice, and to create unity and to bring empathy and compassion into the city council. And also because, I've dealt with frustration and despair, and I believe everything begins internally. When I started to see positive changes and developments in my life, it was when I started to focus internally and focusing on positivity and hope and confronting my fears and frustrations. Then I started to see more positive changes externally, and it's also inspiring me to make a difference in the community, because the greatest thing we can do is to help someone else and to support each other, and it makes us all stronger.
Well, thank you all for coming tonight. It's been a real pleasure to participate in this really thoughtful discussion. I hope that one of your main takeaways from tonight is that as your city councilor, I'm someone who will listen to everyone and work to find common ground so that we can get to work on implementing solutions that hopefully will work for the vast majority of people in this community. Maybe you could tell I really enjoy thinking about these issues, talking about these issues, listening to people's ideas, and it really excites me. And so I'm very passionate about all the issues we've discussed tonight. and have had a lot of time to think about specific solutions to the problems that I've heard so much about from people throughout this community. That experience of knocking on thousands of doors in 2016 and knocking on doors again this year have really shaped my priorities, working to create more affordable housing, building a transportation system that works better for everybody in this community, and protecting what makes Bend special. So thank you all for coming tonight, and I hope that I've earned your vote. Thank you.
In case you didn't understand it from all the three people who preceded me, we're really thankful that you're here. I think campaigning and running for these offices is a lot of work, and we do it for the fame and fortune, but really having you all here and just listening to anything we have to say means a lot. So genuinely, we appreciate your time. I think I would bring a very unique perspective to the Bend City Council with my lifelong Bend history and having seen the good and the bad. And also the perspective that I bring working with college students and understanding pretty significantly how much this opportunity gap between household income and household price affects their daily lives. And I think there are really straightforward, pragmatic things that we can do to increase our supply of housing, increase the supply of land we have for businesses, and really get to work doing things that are going to make a direct impact on the citizens of our awesome community. Thank you so much for your time. Hope to earn your vote in November.
Thank you. I want you to help me thank all of our candidates tonight for coming out. Thank you very much. And also my partners over here, Aaron and Curtis, co-moderators. And again, thanks to all of you. One more shout out to SunWest Builders and Charlie Miller and Miller Lumber for sponsoring tonight's debate and all the debates this season. Have a great evening, and thank you for coming.